Data onboarding has been a time-consuming and manual process for too long. Between spreadsheet templates, writing custom scripts, and implementation services, getting data from a customer into your software takes a long time and costs a lot of money. It's a critical manual step in your customer's onboarding process, with no easy way to get it done. Until now. Flatfile's data onboarding platform automatically converts, validates, and maps all of your data into the specific format you need. In just a few clicks, customer data goes from messy and unorganized to validated and ready to use. With deployment options including no-code, you'll be set up in minutes. Need to collaborate with your customer? Don't email sensitive spreadsheets back and forth. Flatfile lets you invite your customer to a secure, real-time shared workspace. Now you can give your customers a seamless data onboarding experience and save hours doing it. Join the hundreds of businesses who use Flatfile to solve their data chaos and are focused on creating long-term value for their customers. Visit flatfile.com.
Welcome back to the Product-Led Festival. But before we get going with the next helping of inspiring content, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for helping us bring this event to your screens. And don't forget, you can access even more content from exclusive articles and interviews to all past and future events on demand, as well as templates and frameworks by becoming a PLA member. Head over to theproductledalliance.com for more info. Enjoy the next session. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Product-Led Festival. Thank you for tuning in. I'm excited to introduce our next session, which is a panel discussion on implementing OKRs to deliver on business needs. And I'm pleased to hand over to our moderator for the panel, Reba Mathen.
Thank you, Caitlin. Welcome, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. We have a fantastic panel here to discuss OKRs and how they're set across multiple enterprises. We'll give it a couple minutes for the rest of the folks to join us on the panel. Welcome. I'll kick it off by introducing myself, and I love the rest of the panel to introduce themselves as well. My name is Reba Mathen. I have been doing product for over a decade across enterprises and startups. My most recent role was head of product at Cloud9, which got acquired recently, and I'm in transition for my next role. I'd love to hand it over to Nishant.
Thanks, Reba. Excited to be here. I'm Nishant Mohan, CTO at TestRect Health. Prior to this, Chief Product and Technology Officer at Photonic Care. Have worked in the medical device products for a while, kind of a product nerd, and really excited to be here to discuss about OKRs. And I will hand it over back to Reba to introduce the next.
Thanks, Nishant. How about we go over to Ola? Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're on mute. Can anyone else hear her?
No.
All right. We'll move over to Stanimir and come back to you, Ola.
Thank you, Reba. So really exciting to be here and meet everyone. My name is Stanimir. I've been in the tech industry for over 10 years. Before that, I've done degrees in macroeconomics, finance, and information systems. I'm currently leading the FinTech invoicing and product operations team at work. Before that, I was director of product in an applications company called Mule, working mostly on music applications, and I was supervising the product design and data analytics team. So product is pretty much all I think about.
Great. Ola, are you set? We still can't hear you. Maybe we'll give her some time to just re-log into the session. and we'll get her introduction when she's back on. So, while Ola is walking back in, what I'd like to do is just kind of introduce the session. We're all here today to learn more about OKRs and really let's get into the basics of what are OKRs. Very simple: objectives and key results. Essentially, a framework system that most organizations use to kind of align on company goals, and how do you measure them to get to those company goals. It's really interesting, the set of panelists we have here today, because we have different industries and different sizes of organizations. So we are going to be able to learn how they're set and how they're measured, and multiple different things. So just a couple of housekeeping things. We are going to be taking questions at the end. So if you do have questions for the panelists, please post them in the public chat, and we'll be addressing a couple of them at the end. Looks like we have Ola coming back on. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Thanks, Ola. That was really nice and lovely. I was just talking and introducing the concept and how we're going to kind of go through the session today. So with that, I'd like to kick off with the first question that we have for you folks. So what I'd really like to dig into is how are OKRs set in your organization? Kind of talk about maybe, the process and, maybe one or two stakeholders that are really involved in that process setting and that OKR setting. So maybe we can kick it off with Stanimir. Maybe you can start kick us off with that.
Yep, thank you. It's a good question, really. And there is no recipe that works for all the companies or all the teams. Usually OKRs are set like top to bottom level. That's like the strategic goals that you want to get. But that's not really how it should always be set. In most of the cases, it could be from bottom to top, where like something which should be coming from the actual users of the product or people who understand it better. They could be really good insight of something that can make an impact. So if I can give you an example, like on how an OKR can be set up from bottom to top, it's something that is quite often like it is overlooking the whole tech industry. That's something that's called tech debt or range fundamentals. Most of the products that we build run on some sort of technology, but we rarely think that technology is driving it. It's more like focus on the experience, on gathering the data. But a good example of an OKR that can make a long-term impact is how the engineering fundamentals actually could be upgraded, tech stacks could be upgraded, and sometimes like as a company-wide initiative could be fix it week or fix it month that pretty much is very specific. Let's get down to very stable code base before we roll out any new feature, can make a very long impact. And that's an OKR that's set from one of the stakeholders, the engineering team. The engineering team is always a stakeholder when we set up the OKRs, and always the business, because product should be like sitting right between the business and engineering and should be pretty much a partner of both.
Yeah, that's a really good example, and I really like how you kind of focused on one team being the engineering team, and how that's set there. I feel like the natural segue is really for us to kind of understand how it's set within your organization, Nishant, since you're focused more on the technology side.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think Stanimir covered it well. It is one of the most important parts of the OKR process, and often those who are new to the organization or those who are new to OKRs can, struggle a little bit, find it challenging to set the OKRs. what is commonly done at the organization I have been is that it's first set at the company level. So the management kind of sets the broader OKRs. Then individual teams like the product team, the marketing team, etc., will take on the department level OKRs. And in just to help guide individuals on how to set it, there could be a guidance on each key results, that how these key results can be helped by individual groups. Then individuals and the smaller teams start setting their own OKRs, and often the management goes back and looks and realizes, okay, these there are some important things which we were completely overlooking when setting the broader OKRs, and can go back and revise the department or the company level OKRs. So it's good. I think I have found it to be done best when we have done it as an iterative process. And either during the setting, we want to keep it transparent to rest of the organization as well. So the OKR is achieving one of its key purposes of alignment. So all the OKRs are set in alignment, so the manufacturing knows how many devices they have to make based on what sales are thinking, and there is not a huge gap on those lines. It should be well defined that when we say what OKR setting means, what all items need to be covered. Obviously, one has to define the objective, one has to define the key results. In my organization, we also have to define the scoring criteria and put some notes next to it, because a key result by itself may not be completely explanatory. So just having details laid out in a little bit of process helps those setting OKRs as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful. Yeah, I think you mentioned a couple of things, like iteratively going back and looking at some of these goals that are set. So, I'd like to, how often are those, reviewed by, say, the C-suite at your organization? So maybe, I think when OKRs are set, how are they driven from like top to bottom? The C-suite looking at it and kind of going down to, say, either the engineering teams or the product teams. So maybe Ola, you can help us kind of walk us through how that's done at your organization, where how often is it reviewed? How often is it changed or updated? With just, different things changing in the industry, environmentally. If a pandemic happens, there's so many things that happen externally and internally, and how are those changed and reviewed?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. It's a very interesting follow-up, and what we do after the OKRs are more or less set, we follow a very similar process to what Nishant and Stanimir described. And then once the team has aligned their OKRs with the management, we do have a moment each quarter, we do them quarterly, where we do this presentation and all the stakeholders are in it. So we have this final moment of refinement, if you may. And then after that, once they're more or less locked or at least aligned with everyone, we do a bi-weekly sync with our track. And every 2 weeks, we'll look at them and we see how we're progressing towards them, and if we have any blockers or any questions or concerns. And adding to what Stanimir earlier said, there is also the timely aspect to it. So for example, we had a case where technology changed. I'll give a very specific example. We had the ATT consent rolled by Apple in late spring. And of course, everyone knew about it, but we didn't quite realize how much it will hurt our metrics. And because I'm in web, that means for people who bought on web, they're sent to the app. And if they don't accept that consent, then I can't really show them what I need to show them. So we entered the KR planning week with a certain number that we wanted this result to grow. And then after the consent happened, we saw how bad it really was. And we had to realign and readjust the number, quickly checking with the industry, checking with our fellow companies, how they're experiencing it, and then going back to the same stakeholders meeting and saying, guys, it's unrealistic. We're going to meet this goal now with the numbers changing. This is what the plan is. Are you okay with this or not okay? So it's a dialogue. It's not so much a report. This is what we've done. This is what we're going to do. It's more like, hey, this is how it's going. This is what's not working. This is what is working. So it's a less formal exercise that you just talk through your stuff and, but it's more of a conversation. Have I missed something? Is anything changing? How is everyone else going on their OKR? So it's a process, and every 2 weeks we do a review if needed, more often.
Okay, yeah, I mean that seems pretty kind of standard across a lot of organizations in terms of you're constantly looking at them. You're constantly looking at, you know, what has changed, or are we going to be on track? Like, how are some ways, you know, in which OKRs are kind of displayed? I know some organizations display them as a desktop saver, or as, you know, as a monthly report that gets sent out. So Nishant and Stanimir, like, how are those kind of shared or displayed, you know, saved?
Yeah. So for us, it's Google Docs, and I guess we have few things which we display on it. Number one is whether a particular key result is active or inactive, is because sometimes you may only start working on something later in the quarter, so there's no point discussing that in our regular meetings. Then we have a little chart which shows percentage completion. Individual owners are expected to put a number every week to say that approximately that's how far we have completed it, and it's understood that it's always very hard to quantify things, but we look back at the scoring metric and see if we are somewhere in the ballpark there. Then there are columns for what are the next actions to move forward on this key results, and what were the results of the previous actions, and because this is weekly. So I think the visual part is only that chart. Hopefully we can make it more visual moving forward, but that's how we kind of see them. We don't have it kind of displayed at a common place, which will be nice as well. But most people working remotely, it's on a Google Drive folder, and you can go and look there.
Okay. How about yeah?
Yeah, I was just going to elaborate that the COVID situation really changed how people track and report OKRs and the progress. For instance, like we've seen, like monthly reports work pretty well. Even sometimes your hands are very good spot where you should call out the OKR, track the progress. But that's the more like reactive part. The proactive side should be OKRs should be always accessible to everyone. This is something quite frequent when we launch, say, a new OKR. There is always a public OKR tracker, which is available, could be on Google site, could be sent out as the email to everyone, the whole organization, so that everyone, even within the different reporting periods, can go and open and access and see how the different metrics have progressed. If you can automate that in any way, like using a third-party dashboarding tool that can, like, literally on the day update the metrics, so you can see literally every time when you open that you've made a small progress. That's also very powerful because people see that even individual days contribute to your goal achievement. Before the whole COVID situation, it's something that I always liked and really appreciate that. It's more like in the enterprise world, but big companies have big screens when you say open and you go there in the front office, or when you even walk throughout the whole office. There are screens where this is really impactful, different OKRs and progress is being broadcasted. So when you walk in the hallway, you can see the metrics, you can see the progress, you can see the milestone, and that creates really a strong culture of achievement. Because if you know that everybody's watching it, you do the best to hit the target. I think you're on mute, Reba.
So, Reba, you went on mute. Yeah.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Stanimir, for that. That was helpful. I heard all of you mention scoring OKRs once they're set. You mentioned how once they're scored, you kind of iteratively go in and update them and change them. I think the audience would really like to understand how scoring is done, actually. So if you can give an example and just walk us through how scoring is done for that.
You want me to go, Reba?
Yes.
Okay. So I think the way we do it is we make sure that we define the scoring criteria a priori. So like when we are setting a key result, we try to say that if we are at this stage, we will call it a 2. And we do it 0 to 10. I know a lot of people do it 0 to 1. So this is 20% completion. This is 40. This is 60. This is 80, and this is 100. So I don't know. Like let's say uh, we want to uh, launch a app which has a user satisfaction of 4.5 stars, let's say, by end of the quarter. And we will say that, okay, if we have completed all the key minimum viable product related features, then we will call it a 6, no criteria to the stars. If we get 4 out of 5, we will call it an 8. And if we get 5 out of 5, we will give it a 10. And the 10 is always a stretch goal, which we know will be hard to achieve. 8 is something where we try to keep it what is acceptable and is within the definition of that key result. So I think the key point, we always try to make sure that we want to stay as quantitative as possible, but we also have an acknowledgement that a lot of things will not align as easily. We will run into problems which we may not have foreseen. Sometimes the last 2 or 3 things are done within last few days, whereas it takes a lot of build up, especially in hardware world, when you might be waiting for parts to come in, etc. So with those understanding, I think what score setting really helps is to just think what the midterm success is going to look like. So we are not just relying on at the end of the quarter or whatever the OKR period is, but just to think about some midterm milestones. Yeah, and we try to keep updating it on a regular basis. And when the cycle completes, folks can come and give the score, but also give some feedback on did they set the target too strong or too weak, what some unforeseen issues came up, and what lessons did we learn to improve for the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sure most organizations use a similar scoring methodology, but I'd really like to for the audience. I'm sure they're very curious to understand, how often are those kind of stretch goals, as you mentioned, like those high goals. How often are they met? You know, so Stanimir or Ola, like within your organizations, if you have 6 to 8 OKRs, how many of them are actually stretch goals, as we call them here, and how often are they met?
Yep, I can take this one. It should be very hard to hit. So if it's a stretch goal, if it states 10 or 100%, naturally for an aspirational PR, it should be pretty hard to hit. I would say that on average it should be no more than 10% of OKRs. So if you hit more than 10% of OKRs by 100%, then you probably, if set them too low, you can do better. You can actually aim for higher. If you consistently hit around 10%, I think that's pretty good sign that you're all constantly trying to get a bit more out of your OKRs and the goals. If you hit them always 100%, like for every single one, then probably it's more like business as usual, because OKRs by definition should be something which is pushing the limit of the team. Like there are two separate types: committed OKRs, which are more like we need to get something done as a business and as a team because that's mission critical. Business requires that and it needs to be done. So for this, it's really unacceptable not to hit them. But on the aspirational OKRs, where there is a stretch goal, where there is something that you know that you can get at, but it's not really, there is no charted path. You don't know how to get it. It may be like technology problem. It may be communication that you need to align, or even a data issue. And sometimes it requires research. For those cases, hitting like 10% is very, very rare. But even 60%, like if it's 6 out of 10, always it's like a success. And you can always contribute to like building another fundamental OKR on top of that that actually let you get to the 100%.
Yeah, that's very interesting and helpful to understand. Ola, did you have any scenarios at Flow Health that you wanted to talk about?
I have an interesting pain related to that because it's funny you said some should be stretched, some should be ambitious and aspiring, some should be like, get this done. So I wonder how you guys mark them such, like with a little star or something. Because in my case, when I joined Flow, and I came from booking where it was exactly that. So it was 0.3, 0.7, 1.0, where 1.0 being this wild, amazing, to achieve kind of goal. And we all knew that because when the OKR process was introduced, there was extensive training, there were definitions, and we had a tool that explained this. And here it was kind of like a common sense thing. And, there's no such thing as common sense. So what got lost in translation was that apparently in Flow, it was more common to break them out like milestones rather than, good, great, amazing to do. So what I was setting as my wild, ambitious goals, the company thought, she's really going to do that. And at the end of the quarter, it was funny to meet the CEO saying, well, I did not meet my outrageous target. He was like, outrageous target? So it was a little bit funny how that got missed. So I wonder how you guys mark them. Like, how do you know this is a real target, and this is something that would be amazing to have celebratory 100% achievement kind of thing, which you're actually aiming at 60%. How do you know which one's where?
Yep, it really depends on the context. So, yeah, it really depends on the context. When an OKR is being set, usually communicate like what's the objective and what's driving the objective behind it. And this is where you need to define what is the OKR that if you need to say relocate resources to focus on something else, what is that OKR which actually is not mission critical, but if it is, you need to call it out during that objective setting. Every OKR, like a good practice, should have like additional supplementary one pager that explains what's behind the whole OKR, like what's the reason for it to exist. And from it, you base the objectives and the key results. And this is also another place where you can call it. I've seen in different companies like using asterisks, like red asterisks next to them. This is the must-hit OKR. So if it starts to derail from its initial goal and target, then you relocate resource and people to like steer it to the right path.
Yeah, it's almost like you have like a system to kind of recheck how you have set your OKRs and making sure they're actually achievable and they're scored correctly. So I like how you shared your story about your outrageous OKRs and how you didn't meet them per se, and it's almost an example of setting an OKR which was completely out of the ballpark. You kind of kicked it out of the ballpark. We talked about some of those, and then there are some that they completely change and you don't really meet those OKRs and they're really low. So it's interesting to see both sides of the scoring system for OKRs. But let's shift gears a little bit and talk about how we celebrate when OKRs are kind of achieved. What's the process for OKRs are met? How do you celebrate when OKRs are achieved? What does it mean when you say OKRs are actually achieved? Is that 60%, 80% of the scores that are set? So I guess, Ola, I'd like to start with you and kind of get your thoughts on that.
Sure. It's a nice memory because pre-COVID times in booking we had cake or cupcakes and they were always branded to match the KR. So if we've hit like a huge number of something, which was on the list of KRs, and like we've hit it, the next morning there would be little cupcakes with like congratulations on this, and there would be like a post on Facebook or workplace and like, hey, people come celebrate with us. The manager would usually facilitate that, so it was like a huge thing. And sometimes a big company goals met would then result in a party or something massive, so you would remember. Now in Flow, as I said, because a lot of them are really milestones rather than like outrageous goals. I do celebration for my team, so I ordered like a little gift to be sent for everyone that is like themed to the achievement. But usually it's an award of some sort, or it's acknowledged on all hands. Most of the times it's this very nice, proud kind of like, and you've done well, but it's rarely something material because now it's they're all remote, so it's more difficult to arrange. But I do believe it has to be timely, like you've made it and it has to be celebrated right away, because if you wait 2 months for all the gifts to arrive, it kind of faded a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, it's immediate. Once you've hit it, you can kind of focus on like the next thing for you. So that's really great. Um, how about Nishant and Stanimir? How are OKRs celebrated in your organization?
Yeah, I wish it was as much fun as others, and we definitely have to do something on those lines. But we just do like in my current organization, it's the first time I'm doing it. But in the previous one, we would do a meeting and discuss and talk about the lessons learned. And the mindset was that we don't penalize if we are behind on something unless it's significantly behind. But I think there should be a celebration. Maybe if somebody achieves their key result too early in the quarter, there should be a different kind of award. Because maybe it was set, the key result wasn't hard enough. But yeah, I think unfortunately I don't have a good idea. I want to learn a little bit more about the best way to celebrate, because it is very important. I do believe that.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to also learn from the audience how it's celebrated within multiple organizations. So drop in the chat, how are OKRs celebrated within your organizations as well? Stanmir.
Yeah, so before COVID, it was much easier, to be honest. It was always get together kind of party. I still remember hitting an OKR goal where we need to produce like a customer facing functionality, working late to hit the deadline, where marketing was aligned, sales was aligned as well. And even we had a typo on the whole feature. And on the next morning, there was a cake in the office, like huge cake for 50 people. And that typo was printed on the cake itself, and everyone was wanting to have that particular piece. But yeah, that was fun. After COVID, we tried to celebrate our video conferencing. It's not the same thing. Now it's more like there are like mass mails sent to the organization telling that we've hit the OKR, then there is like multiple responses. Well, congratulations, guys, we hit a great goal. Really good for the good work, etc. It's also it feels pretty well. It's actually pretty good, but it's something that is it doesn't feel so much like as it was before. Like it's not so personal.
Yeah, so lots of celebratory cakes and lots of fun activities related to OKRs. So like speaking about fun, OKRs, when kicking off the year, annual planning, setting OKRs can be pretty tedious. You spend a couple of weeks or a couple of days just focusing on how the business needs to be aligned on goals. And you want to make sure that OKR setting is fun for be it the stakeholders, be it your teams, just within the organization. So how are some ways that OKRs are actually fun when you're setting them? How do you kind of curate them so that they are fun for your teams, for your stakeholders, and sharing that? So I'll let someone on the panel pick that up for me.
We're all struggling here thinking OKRs, fun. I have one. It was a long time ago, but it was in a smaller company. So what we did once we've set them, we've printed out the little horse race jockeys and we've cut them out and we've made a physical board in the office, and we were just moving them every other cadenced meeting. So we were seeing how we're reaching towards the goal. So it was, again, a very physical offline activity. Now I just try to paint mine in a nice flow pink color, so they're not boring spreadsheets, so they're a bit brighter. Yeah, I can't have any anything else while we're so remote. But maybe you guys have anything.
I personally started using a lot of emojis when describing the OKRs, and I think that introduces a fun factor of the whole process.
Yeah, I think we have to come up more innovative ways of making OKRs fun in the digital environment, because we can't do the same things we used to do in the, when we can all be in person. Um, Having a little online game for OKR setting is, I think it's a good uh, uh, it's a good activity to try.
Yeah, um, it's really hard in this new age of, when everyone's kind of digitally trying to, and remote work. It's a little hard, but I wonder, like, as we move forward, coming into the hybrid workforce, how do we kind of incorporate some fun into virtually setting OKRs as well as, in person setting OKRs? Um, so I think we had a really good set of questions that we sort of addressed. I think what I'd like to do now is kind of pick some questions from the audience. We have a few questions that have come in via the chat. So the first question that we will address is a question from the audience. How do you manage stakeholders' expectations around OKR progress? How do you handle everyone's expectation? Who would like to help answer that question for the audience? So the question is, how do you manage stakeholders' expectations? Ola.
I could go because we have a process that makes this a no question, because we do have the sprint demos where each team shows what they've done during the sprint, and we do take a moment to acknowledge our OKRs and our progress. And we expect the stakeholders to call in or at least watch the recording or see the slides. And that's the moment where we hope everyone who cares will show up or will review them. And of course, there's like this proactiveness, but then if you have 25 of them, you wouldn't go 25 rounds each sprint. So I hope everyone who cares to know about my OKRs listens to the meeting. And that would probably be the most effective way. If you have a cadence of events or like a regular post or like a place where you record them or you update the progress and you just tag everyone involved, or you hope they come in and check them themselves.
Yeah, that's a great way. It's a great question that came in. Nishant or Sanmir, anything else to add to that?
No, I think Ola covered it. I think it's there are probably at two levels. One is the whole purpose of OKR is to have transparency and alignment. So it's I think that's where the regular scoring or regular update comes into play, where we can everyone can see where a particular key result stands, and all the stakeholders per se. We hear from stakeholders. I understand those who have dependent key results or other dependent projects on a particular key result. And I think the expectation part is very important, especially when we are setting stretch goals. It becomes very important to set the expectations right, that if we have set a target for something which we know is a stretch goal, then it should be communicated to everyone in the management board, etc., to realize that that's not what we expect is likely to be completed, but that's what we are going for. So I think that's where the expectation part comes in a little bit.
Yeah, it's usually, my 2 cents, that's it's usually defining the OKRs where the biggest of the conversations with the different stakeholders and managing the expectations comes into play. Once an OKR has been defined and it's being tracked, of course there are expectations why it's not gonna hit the target as early as we thought that it's gonna do it. If there is like a timeline, as Nishant said, it's usually you need to build up a lot of activities before you can see the output. And it's usually the OKR doesn't progress like in a linear way. You don't see if it's 10-week OKR, 10% the first week, 10% the second one. It's usually 1, 2, 3, 5, and then you see like 50% of the progress done in the last 20% of the time period. And that's something that a lot of the stakeholders often do not understand.
And how, I guess, were you going to add something to that, Nishant? Sorry. No? Okay. Yeah, I think I really like the way you gave example of how you do kind of review that during your demos, and Samuel, it was really helpful to understand how stakeholders sometimes may not understand that, and you probably need to just kind of align with them to kind of show how you're going to get to that destination of the OKRs. And so some other questions we have here are, just a great question that's come in is, how do we manage OKR interdependence between areas, or maybe between teams as well? How is that tied as you are maybe setting them or scoring them? So, Nishant or Sanmir, who would like to pick that up question?
I can go if I believe interdependence is really at the heart of OKRs, right? Like that one of the key reasons to set OKRs is that rest of the organization knows how we all depend on each other, and I think that's why the goal setting has to be a process and not an event. So we all cannot set our key results and then realize that they are not interdependent. So, for instance, I mentioned if the sales is planning to sell 100 units in the coming quarter, the manufacturing should at least have planned to build 100 or have inventory for those, which aligns accordingly. And if that's not the case, then one or the other party has to make a compromise, right? Like either we have to change the sales number or come up with new ways of manufacturing more. So I think during the setting process, I think it's the responsibility of the management to make sure that everything does look aligned. It's also the responsibility of individuals who have whose key results will depend on the others, which in more cases than not, that will be the case, to see if everything is in alignment. So I think having the transparency is probably the key to ensuring that interdependence can be managed from my perspective.
Yeah. I love that you said that interdependence is kind of heart of setting the OKRs. I love that. That seems so key to this conversation.
Yep, what Nishant said is actually true. In all large-scale organizations that work like Experian and Uber, there is always cross-team dependency. And what always has worked for me is just to try to find where on the upper level management the different teams overlap. And then you just surface why an OKR is important for the whole organization. And once you convince that common level of management that hitting the results and actually achieving the objective is going to be beneficial for the whole organization, not just your team, then it becomes a lot easier to have the conversation with the dependent teams that it's something that they're going to benefit from if they implement that. And if there is the buy-in from their management, it's a lot easier. Otherwise, you just need to sell something which no one wants to buy.
I would really like to add to that what you said. There's someone who gets the benefit from that. And what I found is when you have a joint OKR, that's really the hardest OKR to always manage, because there is always someone who gets more benefit out of it than the other. And what I found the hard way is that you really have to decide and arrange on who is the one accountable and responsible for it and who's going to drive it. Because I don't believe in dual ownership. You're always going to kind of hope the other one does more, but you really need to align. But then the one that gets most benefit should be the one kind of pushing and updating and checking and kind of owning it, with the support of the other, of course. But then, especially when there's more than two involved, there is always one who you need to appoint. And I believe that's the one who just receives the most benefit out of this work.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think it's really important just to have one owner and kind of partnering with other people to kind of get to that destination. We had some other questions come in as well, so we'll take the last question. How do you engage your team to feel ownership involved in setting an OKR, especially if they were not involved in identifying and setting the OKR? So kind of maybe, how is that kind of that ownership given to different teams and dispersed to different teams? And how do they feel like they own some of those OKRs, even though they were not part of the process? Samir, you want to start? You want to tell us a little bit about how that's done?
Yep. It's usually quite common when you set up an OKR that there are people who are not involved, especially in large organizations. You can communicate with the progress, collect feedback, but it's always from people who are appointed to provide that, but you can't really, if it's like thousands of people organization, collect feedback from everyone. The key to me is always to try to relate what the key results are gonna make an improvement for that particular team or the particular individual, because you can deliver something that is beneficial for the business, but quite often it's like win-win. It either brings capability, it enables another team or another person to achieve something which wasn't possible before, and you just need to start building that future path. Hitting this OKR is gonna allow you to hit OKR X, Y, Z in future, and actually this is what you should be looking for, like the future. OKRs are not just about hitting the objective; it's about enabling you to do something more in the future, and there is always something that they can unblock a team or individual to achieve in the future, and this is where such conversation should focus on.
Yeah, that makes definitely sense. I think it's important for them to know how it's broken down for their teams and just individual objectives and how they're tied in. But like in terms of like ownership, Nishant or Ola, do you want to add anything on your side?
I have a very dramatic answer to that, honestly, because I don't believe they will be owning anything they didn't sign up for. It's very difficult to convince someone that they should feel empowered and owning something when you just gave it to them. Now you're responsible of this. I try to keep the same balance as you don't tell your engineers like how to do things, you tell what problem you need to solve, and they do figure out a way how to get it solved. So even if there's a company set OKR, I always try to still have the exercise for some quite straightforward things are more fast than they are to me. So I try to see, is there anything else we can do to make this KR achievable? Have we missed anything? So everyone's involved in the conversation and the active thinking about it, rather than, okay, fine. Yeah, I'm clear with the OKRs. You do need the buy-in, but you do need some sort of exercise around them to get everyone's, thoughts on it, alignment, disalignment, anything. There has to be at least a day session for the team to get on board, to get aligned, to question it, there has to be some sort of buy-in. Otherwise, they won't. They might say they are, but they won't. They won't feel them. They won't own them if they weren't involved in any sort of decision-making around them.
Yeah, definitely. It's like you get them to start thinking about how they're going to get to that that goal. Absolutely. So it looks like we're kind of at time here. We definitely had a lot of insights from the product leaders and technology leaders that we have here. Any last insights that you would like to share with the audience? I'll start off with John.
The only thing I like to always say is to make sure your OKR process aligns with the basic nature of your team. Don't try to use a recipe or don't try to force what's written in the books. OKRs have become a very, very overly used term. In the end, we are trying to set goals and in a manner that makes the team feel excited and keeps them focused. So see what aligns well with the basic nature of your team and just use the process accordingly. If it's not OKRs that aligns well with your team, don't use the process. It's not the only way of setting goals and managing the team. So that's really an insight I would give.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a good one. The insight that I'm going to share and really want the audience to see, it's transparency, transparency, and transparency. This is the only way to build very solid framework around OKRs. You should be transparent on how you set them, who you involve in the process, what's the process, why you've picked up particular key results, how you've measured them, if it's forecast, how it was forecasted. Once you define the objectives, why these objectives were selected. Then be transparent about the progress, if you're doing well, if you're not doing well. And then also be transparent when you grade them at the very end, why you think you did not hit them. If it's something that is very close to, let's say, on the border between 60 or 70% of hitting them, just consider it was pretty much as achieved with some lessons learned out of it. And also be transparent about even failed OKRs, because it gives you knowledge. Knowledge is expensive, and sometimes it takes an error to learn something. And even failed OKRs can be beneficial for the company. So do lessons learned, do postmortems, make them public, invite people to ask questions, so that you can have this transparency. It's why it's a cycle. Once you start doing that, it's a lot easier after the first cycle. You have improved OKR setting process, improved tracking, then improved grading, etc. And after several iterations, it's very easy to have an organization built around OKRs.
Absolutely.
And I would add to what both. Sorry, we have a little bit of a lag. Sorry, I would just add to what both the gentlemen here said, because I would just add it is a conversation. It's a framework for a conversation and not a goal of its own. I've seen some people get fixated on their OKRs, and the OKRs is the most important thing, but it's just a way to shape the conversation. And you just have to remind yourself to zoom out a little bit to remember why you're doing this. What is this? It's just a process to get things done. But I've seen some people get like over and into them. But it's very important to have a canvas for the conversations and the process that drives them, but not get fixated on OKRs as the most important number.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of fitting it to how it fits into your organization or your team goals. Yeah, absolutely. We have definitely run out of time. I'd like to bring Caitlin back in. Thank you to the audience and the panelists that we have here. Hopefully we have shared our knowledge and experience with setting OKRs, and you've been able to take some really good insights away from the session. I'm going to hand it over to Caitlin.
Thanks so much, Reba. That was a really great session, guys. Lots of interesting insights, and I think the audience are all agreeing with me now. I see some messages coming through. So yeah, thanks again, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. Stay with us. We've got another session up at 5:30. And yeah, thanks again to all our panelists and our attendees.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.